Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My fiancé was the crown prince of New York's high society. Yet, he fell in love with the girl I once sponsored. At my birthday party, that girl timidly hid behind Ethan Grant, acting both stubborn and innocent at the same time. "Claire, you only sponsored me for a while," she said softly. "That doesn't mean I owe you anything. Every penny I have, I earned honestly. You have no right to insult me. Ethan would never like a woman like you. Someone who only knows how to make money." I smiled without hesitation, withdrew my financial support for her, and at the same time cut off all business cooperation with the Grant family. In this life, I would make them live worse than death. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back at my own birthday party. The girl from the mountain I had once sponsored, Emily, was wearing the pink diamond necklace I had bought at an auction. Her cheeks were flushed shyly as she followed behind my fiancé, Ethan Grant. Ethan looked confident and imposing. His black suit emphasized his tall, straight figure. With his arm around Emily, he strode proudly through the crowd, a self-satisfied smile curving his lips. In my previous life, blinded by old affection for Ethan, I had pretended not to notice the intimacy between them and still agreed to marry him, all to help the Grant family secure their position in the business world. After our marriage, I became pregnant while Ethan brought Emily into my company step by step, giving her opportunities she didn't deserve. On the day I gave birth, Ethan abandoned me, leaving me in agony on the cold floor just to be with Emily. "That child was a trick," he said coldly. "You fooled me into this pregnancy. I don't want it. Get out of my sight. I'm going to find Emily." Even though I was rushed to the hospital, I fell into critical condition and remained unconscious for a month. No one came to visit me. When I was on the verge of death, I overheard the doctor saying that Ethan and Emily had sold my company's confidential information, causing my parents to suffer heart attacks and die. Meanwhile, the Grant family, thanks to my support, had risen to become the wealthiest conglomerate in the country. The so-called Crown Prince of New York used 1,000 private jets to propose to the poor but determined girl. Hearing that, tears of fury filled my eyes. But in this life, I swore I would never let that despicable couple get what they wanted. Everything they had stolen from me, I would make them pay back 10,000 times over. I swirled the wine in my glass and watched the shameless pair walking toward me. Ethan looked me up and down, the corners of his mouth turning downward. "Didn't I tell you to pick Emily up? Why did you leave her stranded at the airport? Claire, do you even have a heart? It's her first time here. She doesn't know anyone. What if she got tricked or kidnapped? You never really meant to help her. You were just pretending to be kind." Meeting his accusing and disdainful gaze, I replied calmly, "I already arranged for someone to pick her up. She just didn't answer the phone." Ethan sneered. "So what if you went yourself to get her? Rich girls like you are always arrogant. You'll never be someone like Emily." I laughed, pointed at the necklace around Emily's neck and said coldly, "You're right. How could a woman like me ever become a cheap, manipulative girl like her?" Emily's face turned crimson. She shrank behind Ethan, tears glimmering in her eyes. Hastily, she took off the necklace and held it out to me. "Claire, this was a gift from Ethan," she said nervously. "I didn't know it belonged to you. Besides, he's the one who brought me here. Yes, I'm poor and I grew up with your sponsorship, but I never asked you for anything. You offered to help me on your own. You have no right to humiliate me." Her eyes were slightly red, glistening with that same false innocence I had once been foolish enough to believe. With her look of pitiable innocence, Emily pleaded again. I gave a cold smile, took the necklace from her, and threw it straight into the trash. "Yes, you never asked me for anything," I said. "From now on, I won't give you anything either. Consider what I gave you before as food for dogs. Whether it's college or anything later on, you won't receive another cent from me." Emily seemed to force a small smile, but tears immediately welled up again. "Sister Claire, Ethan already said he will take full responsibility and provide for me, so you don't need to worry anymore." Slower, she added, "I have Ethan to take care of me now. Why do I need to go to university? Being by his side and taking care of him isn't better." Ha! At last, her sly foxtail showed itself. Back when I chose to help Emily, I gave freely for years. Not because I was stupid, but because compared with the other children she seemed more pitiful. The first time I came to that small town, she knelt before me. Tears and mud mixed on her face. "Sister, both my parents are dead. I'm starving. I want to study." I rented a room for her so she could go to school, paid her living expenses, and even hired someone to look after her until she graduated high school. Yes, she never asked for these things, but if she hadn't played the victim, I might have chosen a different girl. One ambitious and sensible, not someone always at the bottom of the class. Now, Ethan looked at me with contempt. "Indeed, I never really trusted Emily," he said. "If she can survive on her own, then she can. After all, the Grant Corporation isn't inferior to the Anderson Group in the slightest. A rich son like me supporting a woman is as easy as flipping a hand." He wore that smug, boastful expression as if he'd forgotten the time he crawled to me, begging for help. I stared back at him impassively. "Ethan, if I hadn't invested in your family back then and helped you attract customers, you might not even be able to support yourself now." At that, Ethan's face flickered, then quickly snapped back into arrogance. He lifted his chin and sneered. "Do you really think our company was saved solely because of you? Ridiculous. It was my business acumen. The money you gave back then? I didn't even bother to count it. Perfect. I've been waiting for him to say that." I stood up, walked to the stage, took the microphone, and cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to my birthday party. Today I want to make an announcement. From this day forward, the Anderson Group will terminate all cooperation with the Grant Corporation. The two families will no longer be associated. As for Ethan Grant, now that he has someone else by his side, I volunteer to withdraw and cancel our engagement. From now on, there will be no relationship between him and me." The moment those words left my mouth, the hall erupted. Everyone turned to look at Ethan. His face drained and flushed in turns, but after a few seconds, he regained composure and stalked forward with proud arrogance. "Hoof! The Anderson Group worked with us for years, but now we've parted ways. They can't keep up with our pace of development. Severing ties is inevitable. And Claire, she's nothing special. From now on, the Grants and the Andersons are completely unrelated." The ungrateful man's true face was finally exposed as he brazenly stepped down from the stage. Ethan put his arm around Emily and walked out, completely ignoring the shocked, disdainful, and pitying stares from everyone around. Because aside from him, everyone in that room knew the truth. Without the Andersons, the Grants were nothing. The birthday party ended in chaos. But I didn't feel sad. All I felt was disgust. Ethan and I had grown up together, childhood sweethearts. Back then he was gentle, attentive, and kind, but only to me. Yet, as we grew older, I slowly realized he was simply using our closeness to win favor with my family. Even so, when his family fell into crisis and the burdens piled up, I didn't hesitate to help him. At that time I had just graduated. Above me was my cousin who managed the company, and below me my younger nephew. My path into the family business was full of obstacles. But I gritted my teeth and climbed step by step. After 2 sleepless, exhausting years, I finally proved myself and earned the recognition of the company's senior executives. That was when Ethan called me, sobbing miserably over the phone. "Claire, I'm about to lose everything," he cried. "It hurts so much. I'm not even worthy of you anymore. Claire, you know what I want most? I want to build a home with you. In my previous life, I let emotions cloud my judgment. I risked being expelled from the company, poured money into his family's failing business, and ran everywhere to help him build connections. A pile of scrap metal. That's what I turned into gold with my own hands. But now, the man who gained fame and fortune because of me acted as if none of it mattered. His tears back then had turned into pig fat, thick, greasy, and revolting. In the end, those 2 ungrateful wolves were truly made for each other. I had been too soft-hearted before, raising 2 poisonous tumors with my own hands. Now I would make sure to cut them out completely. When I returned home, the news had already reached my parents. My father adjusted his glasses, his expression one of relief as though a great weight had been lifted. "Claire, you've finally come to your senses," he said. "Even though our family and the Grants have known each other for generations, anyone can see that Ethan Grant isn't trustworthy." My mother was so overjoyed. "You used to act like you were possessed, always running to help him," she said tearfully. You made your grandparents so angry back then. No matter how much we tried to talk sense into you, you wouldn't listen. From now on, sweetheart, you'd better keep your eyes open. I nodded. Don't worry, Mom, Dad. From now on, I'll focus all my energy on my work. I won't let either of you worry about me again. That evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grant hurried over to our house, apologizing nonstop. Claire, Mr. Grant began with a weary sigh. Our two families have been close for generations. We can't let this one incident destroy everything. It's all that foolish boy's fault. He was impulsive, but he's still young. Don't be too hard on him. Mrs. Grant's eyes were red, and she spoke quickly, her voice almost pleading. It's all because of that fox of a girl, she said bitterly. I don't know where she came from, but she dared to seduce my son. Men are easily blinded by temptation. He just made a mistake. A mistake any man could make. Claire, please forgive him. I promise he'll never do something like this again. Having lived next door to the Grants for years, I knew exactly what they were thinking. They were terrified of losing my family's support. They didn't truly believe their son was wrong. They just knew that as long as I wasn't officially married into their family, they still had to bow their heads and apologize. In the past, out of respect for Ethan, I had always been polite to them. But now I didn't hesitate to respond coldly. I already have everything I need, I said firmly. I don't have to dig through the trash to pick up something someone else threw away. My words were sharp, and their faces changed instantly. I smiled faintly, softening my tone just enough to make it sound like finality, not cruelty. Mr. and Mrs. Grant, Ethan is an adult. He needs to take responsibility for his own actions. That mix of calm, firmness, and quiet strength left them speechless. Their expressions darkened, and neither could say another word. As they turned to leave, Mrs. Grant was so flustered she nearly bumped into the door. After dealing with them, I headed to the office. The moment I walked in, I saw my colleagues clapping and cheering. Finally, we're free from the burden of Grant Corporation, one of them said. If it weren't for the family connections, none of us would have. Our company's profits have multiplied several times over. We'd long grown tired of the Grants, a bunch of parasites who fancied themselves rulers of the world. Luckily, the Anderson Group's vice president finally woke up. Looking at Ethan's posture, he was nothing but a trashy gigolo who fancied himself a tycoon. Damn it. At the very least, if I spent money to support a man, he should be grateful and serve loyally. The moment I appeared, the atmosphere fell silent. The secretary hurried forward with the contract, looking embarrassed. Vice President, everything else has been handled satisfactorily, but there's this one issue. This is the contract we signed with the Grant Corporation a few months ago. If we cancel, we may have to pay breach of contract damages, she said. I skimmed the contract without a trace of anxiety and immediately called Ethan. The project, a contract you signed a while ago to support your branch, is terminated. Please come by to sign the cancellation, I told him. In reality, that contract was practically a charity. I put in effort and resources to help him make money while the returns were negligible. On the other end of the line, Ethan laughed arrogantly. Cancel it if you must. Just compensate us for breach of contract damages. That small sum won't ruin the Andersons, will it? Once again he shocked me with his gall, but at the same time this was exactly what I wanted. Fine, see you in court, I said. Why should I preserve his face? In court, clutching his contract, Ethan still acted arrogant and confident, but I had the company's top lawyer. I was no amateur. Our defense focused on three main points. First, at the time the contract was signed, Ethan and I were in a romantic relationship, so the contract contained a strong personal affection element that severely harmed my interests. Second, the amount of purported breach of contract damages far exceeded legal limits, and thus the contract was unenforceable. Third, although the contract was signed, the Grant side showed signs of fraud. They never paid the deposit as agreed, meaning the contract had not actually taken effect. Hearing that, Ethan immediately flew into a rage and started shouting in court. Who are you trying to fool? Affection this, affection that? The contract is written clearly. Pay up. The judge frowned as he reviewed the documents. Ethan's lawyer, furious, glared at him as if he wanted to strangle this foolish client. But Ethan still refused to see the problem and continued to scream. When the judge didn't react, I presented additional documents. Your Honor, as far as I know, the Grant Corporation has committed tax evasion over many years, serious legal violations. Therefore, if there is a party in breach, it is actually them. About a year ago, Ethan suddenly started buying luxury cars and additional villas, spending over $70 million a month, which shocked me. When I asked him about it, he smugly said it was due to their new business model, that the Anderson Group was old-fashioned and bound to reform. At the time, something felt off, but I trusted him and didn't investigate. Only when Emily appeared did I start to scrutinize their actions and discovered that Ethan was brazen enough to do anything. The judge read the documents and immediately announced a suspension of the hearing. Outside the courtroom, Ethan's eyes were bloodshot with fury and veins stood out on his forehead. Claire, I knew you had no good intentions. I just abandoned you and now you falsely accuse me, he spat. I smiled coldly. Whether I was falsely accusing him or not, only he knew. Wait until the court gathered all 10 pieces of evidence. Everything would soon come to light. I turned to get into my car, but Ethan suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my arm. His face twisted in anger. Stay right there, he shouted. You're doing all this just because you hate that I'm with Emily, aren't you? No matter what schemes you try, I will never go back to a cruel, heartless woman like you. Emily is kind. She's 1,000 times better than you. You're dreaming if you think otherwise. I yanked my arm free and slapped him twice. Left then right. Sharp, clean and perfectly balanced. Then go find your precious Emily, I said coldly. Please tie yourselves together and never let go. His eyes burned with rage. His fists clenched tight as if he were about to strike me. Too bad my bodyguards weren't just for decoration. In the end, he could only grit his teeth, roar in frustration and glare as I drove away. But right at the entrance to the villa district, Emily was sitting miserably by the flower bed. The moment she saw me, she jumped up and ran into the road to block my car. The right side of her face was swollen red, the faint imprint of a hand still visible. Her tears hadn't even dried yet, but in the blink of an eye, her gaze was filled with venomous hatred. Claire, why are you doing this to me? She shouted. Do you think by running to Mr. and Mrs. Grant and turning them against me, I won't be able to marry into their family? You're dreaming. As long as Ethan loves me, I will become his wife. I lowered the window, smiling coldly as if watching an animal perform in a circus. I sincerely hope you two stay tied together for life, I said. And as for not being accepted by his parents, what does that have to do with me? Am I his mother? She froze and I added mockingly, don't be in such a hurry. If you can't be the main wife, you can always be the mistress. After all, you're already used to that role, aren't you? Emily's jaw tightened, and she pointed a trembling finger at me. Don't think that just because you have money, you can do whatever you want. Ethan and I love each other truly. Nothing can separate us. No man would ever like a woman like you. Someone who only knows how to make money and doesn't know how to love. I looked her up and down and shrugged. You and that man are perfect for each other. A gold digger and a playboy have fun together and don't worry about a couple of slaps. But tell me, how many 18-year-old girls think they can climb into heaven by marrying rich? Don't underestimate how smart wealthy families are. Anyway, good luck to you. Emily screamed, her face twisted in fury. You're just saying that because you can't have him. Sour grapes, Claire. I pressed the accelerator lightly, and my car surged forward just enough to make her flinch. She jumped back, terrified, to the side of the road. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her stomping and screaming in anger as I drove away. In the days that followed, I threw myself completely into work. Every issue the Grant Corporation had left behind was resolved perfectly under my supervision. One afternoon, my grandfather came to my office himself, his eyes full of pride. This girl, he said, smiling. A few years ago, you nearly turned our home upside down because of the Grants. We tried to talk sense into you, but you wouldn't listen. Thank goodness you've come to your senses now. You've been doing great work lately. We can finally relax. Those few light words nearly brought tears to my eyes. Ever since I was young, I knew that although my grandparents loved me, the one they placed all their hopes on was my cousin, Andrew Anderson. Not for any special reason, but simply because he had always pushed every problem onto me. Out of family loyalty, I had never argued or fought back. For years, my grandparents pinned all their expectations on him. Only when I worked hard and earned admission to a top university abroad did they start to look at me differently. Later, when I joined the company, Andrew constantly made things difficult for me. Misunderstandings and prejudice piled up, and I had to put in 100 times more effort than anyone else to prove my worth. It wasn't just because of Ethan. I had dragged myself into the mud. Although I hadn't caused any damage to the company, I hadn't achieved anything impressive either. A few days ago, someone quietly told me that if my grandfather still couldn't see my potential, he might hand over full control of the company to Andrew Anderson. But now my grandfather was finally at ease. And for the first time in a long while, so was I. "Thank you for trusting me, Grandpa," I said sincerely. "I'll keep working hard." That evening, I stayed late at the office to finish some reports. Most of the employees had gone home, and the building was silent. Suddenly, the door opened a crack and Andrew stepped in, dressed head to toe in designer clothes, a mocking smile tugging at his lips. Well, he drawled. "Look at you, all grown up now. Actually learning to calculate. Be honest with me. What did Grandpa want from you this morning? Did you ask him for more shares again? Such a tiny pair of hands, yet your greed knows no limits." My expression turned cold. "Andrew, you're getting paranoid. I know a great therapist if you ever need one." After everything that happened with Ethan and Emily, I had learned 2 valuable lessons. First, excessive pity only brings disaster upon yourself. Second, patience doesn't make people respect you, just makes them see you as easy prey. Andrew froze for a moment, then exploded. "Watch your damn mouth. I'll tell you this. The Anderson family's entire fortune will belong to me sooner or later. A woman like you shouldn't even dream about it. If you know your place, maybe I'll throw you a few scraps someday. But if you ever cross me, I'll make sure you and your parents are out on the streets." And that right there was why, despite being born into a wealthy family, I still had to fight so hard. Because my cousin's biggest dream, even in his sleep, was to drive my entire family out of the Anderson estate. I smirked faintly. "Oh, come on, Mr. CEO. I heard you're already keeping 10 mistresses outside. Surprised you still have the energy to meddle in family business." His eyes bulged and he jabbed a finger at me, nearly poking me in the face. "If you dare tell my wife, I'll beat you to death." I rolled my eyes in disgust. Don't worry, I wouldn't waste my breath. Not because I'm scared, but because it's beneath me. Petty drama like yours isn't even worth striking a match over. Soon after, the court reopened the trial. The evidence of the Grant Corporation's tax evasion was irrefutable. The total violations reached 9 figures. In the end, I won the lawsuit. The Grants not only had to pay breach of contract compensation to me, but were also hit with massive government fines. The moment the verdict was announced, Ethan stood frozen, drained of color. His usual arrogant smirk vanished completely. Outside the courthouse, he erupted in fury. "Claire Anderson, why did you do this to me, you venomous woman? You can't stand to see me doing well, can you? You're so twisted by jealousy, you'll never be loved by anyone. Just a fine. I can still afford to pay it." I glanced at the verdict in my hand and replied coolly, "You're right. After all, your good days have only just begun." And indeed they had, for me, not for him. After that, the Grant Corporation began to plummet without breaks. They emptied every reserve to pay the fines, and their reputation crumbled overnight. Once the media exposed their illegal activities, the company's name was dragged through the mud. Their stock prices collapsed. Profits evaporated. It was total ruin. A centipede may still twitch after it's dead. But I knew every hidden corner of the Grant Corporation, every weak joint in their structure. The truth was, the Grants had already suffered a financial crisis years ago. They'd only managed to survive this long because the Anderson Group had been supporting them from behind the scenes. On the surface, they looked brilliant, but once they lost my backing, they couldn't withstand a strong wind. When the situation became desperate, Ethan's parents came to me begging, but I avoided meeting them. From what my parents told me, they had even gone to plead with my grandparents and were flatly refused. "This is not our girl's fault," my father told them. "If anyone's to blame, it's your son for being thoughtless and greedy. Claire has already helped enough. Please don't trouble her any further." Mr. and Mrs. Grant were silenced and had no face to linger. They could only lower their heads and leave. Back at the company, my secretary informed me that the next day there would be a major bidding event from an overseas enterprise named Sorrento. Although Sorrento wasn't the top global conglomerate, winning their contract would not only bring substantial profits, but also open the Anderson Group to international markets. I had studied them carefully for a long time, and this time I was determined to win the bid. On the bidding day, many major firms showed up. Several CEOs attended in person. In the crowd, I saw Ethan clutching a stack of documents, muttering to himself like a grade school kid trying to memorize lines. The moment he caught sight of me, his expression darkened, and he slowly stepped closer. "How can the Andersons, so big and prosperous, still be hungry for a bid like this?" he hissed. "Claire, you're aiming at me, aren't you? Trying to snatch everything from the Grants." I glanced at him without the slightest respect and blew him a big, mocking raspberry. "Snatch? Your company is nothing but 2 shabby rooms and 3 empty lots. Do you really think I'd stoop to fight over that?" I tossed back. "Calm down and stop thinking so highly of yourself." Ethan ground his teeth and spat each word. "Just you wait. I'll make you lose face right now." With that, he stormed off, fists clenched in fury. I smiled coldly to myself. What an idiot. Mr. and Mrs. Grant were audacious to the end, still treating that foolish Ethan like some last lifeline. Fine. I was curious to see what stunt he planned next. The meeting officially began. Each company submitted their proposal and presentation in turn. The selection committee reviewed everything carefully and eventually shortlisted 5 names. The Anderson Group, the Grant Corporation, and 3 other major city firms: the Lin Group, the Tao Group, and the Gomez Corporation. Each company was asked to give a brief intro and then present their detailed plan. After presentations from the Lin and Tao groups, the committee nodded in approval. Next, they invited the Anderson Group CEO, me, to present. I stood up and adjusted my tone, preparing to speak when a loud, unpleasant voice cut through the room. "Miss Claire is a notorious scammer," someone shouted. "Just a few days ago, she swindled a lot of money from our company. If you cooperate with her, the consequences could be unpredictable." As expected, Ethan started acting out again. The committee paused, several directors casting curious looks my way. I kept a calm smile and did not lose my composure. "It's true. I recently had a lawsuit with the Grant Corporation," I said evenly. "But I won that case. You can trust in the fairness of the law. No futzter can remain above the law indefinitely. This is an important part of the bidding session. Please allow me 10 minutes to present my plan." The directors murmured among themselves, then pulled my materials out to review again. "Her plan is impressive," one of them said. "We'd like to hear more about her ideas, but please note, we will not cooperate with any company that has a stain on its reputation." To be honest, for many years, the Anderson Group had dominated the market in the city. All I needed to do was perform my job well and present a perfect plan. I trusted in my own abilities and the company's. Previously, we had conducted a market survey at the request of the foreign company. Based on the results, I proposed 3 plans to help improve their current management model and simultaneously stimulate market demand. As soon as I finished speaking, the directors nodded in unison and applauded. I sat down calmly, glancing at Ethan, who stared at me with a dark, brooding gaze. Yet, when he turned to the directors, they immediately smiled and flattered him. "We have also conducted careful research," one of the directors said. "We understand that your company is a corporation from Country M." I couldn't help but laugh, and the director's eyes widened in surprise. "We're from Country Y," I reminded them with a frown. Ethan's face immediately flushed red, and he quickly lowered his head, stammering an apology. "Sorry, I misspoke. This is our plan," I continued confidently. Ethan was so flustered that sweat ran down his face, and when he sat down, he almost toppled over. After a short 10-minute discussion, I stood up to announce the result. "It's truly an honor to meet all of you today," I began. "Each plan has its own strengths, but given the current situation, we find the Anderson Group's proposal the most suitable. It's clear that our CEO has prepared thoroughly and demonstrated absolute sincerity. If this project is entrusted to her, we can be completely confident in the outcome." Ethan immediately shouted in protest. "On what basis? We've prepared thoroughly too. She just has a strong family background. You're being biased. Unfair." I glanced at him, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, you prepared so thoroughly that you didn't even know which country the company belonged to. Your plan lacked coherence. Your analysis was nonsense and you tried to memorize it at the last minute. Yet, you couldn't remember 2 sections. You expect anyone to cooperate with you based on what? Your empty words. Ethan's veins bulged on his forehead as he screamed and lunged toward me. Unfortunately for him, my bodyguards were already waiting and immediately restrained him, though that kicked him back a few steps. Grandpa had already been waiting for me in his office for the good news. Excellent. Very good, he said. The order isn't huge, but it's always been hard to win. Andrew ran around a few times with no clues. Yet in the end it was a little girl like you who won it. Indeed, the waves behind sweep away the ones ahead. It seems you've truly developed your resolve. Coincidentally, the head of the sales department had just resigned. Grandpa smiled and said, "You take over to celebrate. Call everyone, your parents, your uncle, and I to join in the celebration." Later, at the VIP suite of the hotel, Grandpa raised his glass to toast me, praising my achievements endlessly. Andrew sat to the side without raising his glass, his tone full of disdain. "So what if you got this contract? At most it's just over $1 billion. Was it necessary to make such a fuss? Outsiders might think the Andersons now depend on you." Grandpa's expression darkened, and I no longer bothered to restrain myself. "Grandpa, they told me today that they never refused to cooperate with the Anderson Group. It's just that in the past, my cousin kept scheduling meetings with them but always arrived late, acting arrogantly, as if the world revolved around him. In the past he had constantly gone behind my back, badmouthing me to Grandpa. Now the roles had reversed. And besides, everything I said was the truth." Grandpa's face grew increasingly dark. He slammed his hand down on the table. "Andrew Anderson, all those years of your frivolous play I could overlook, but there's one thing no one is allowed to touch: the interests of the Anderson family." Andrew froze, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Grandpa, don't listen to her nonsense," he started to protest, but before he could finish, Grandpa brought the cane down sharply 3 times on his thigh, his voice stern. "Do you think I don't know everything you've done? How much loss have you caused the company over the years? I think the position of head of the sales department is best handed to your sister." Andrew lowered his head, his expression dark as though a black cloud had settled over him. The dinner that evening was far from pleasant. Throughout the meal, his eyes constantly shot venomous glances in my direction. "No matter, sooner or later, everything will fall into place." Not long after, the Grant Corporation situation became dire. I heard that Ethan was borrowing money from everywhere, but sadly, the future of the company had already bottomed out. No one in their right mind would throw money into a bottomless pit. Eventually, the Grant Corporation officially declared bankruptcy. Entertainment news showed all 3 of them, Ethan and his parents, looking glum, carrying large bags as they struggled to move out of their luxurious villa. Their faces were worse than anyone else's, burdened with enormous debts. In the end, they had no choice but to move into public housing and start a life of hard labor, living day by day. Meanwhile, Emily didn't seem to care at all. But I didn't rush. Lately, my cousin had also been missing in action. Grandpa was furious for days, unable to smile, while my uncle and aunt were anxious beyond measure, not knowing where he was or what he was doing. I, however, knew. Over the years, I had been quietly supporting Emily through the household staff who cared for her. I had gathered plenty of interesting information. For example, during her high school years, she had paid no attention to her studies. At first, she tried to associate with a few wealthy boys at school, but no one noticed her. By the summer of 11th grade, when she came to me to complete her sponsorship paperwork, she stayed a few days and immediately latched on to my cousin Andrew. For years, the 2 of them had an entangled relationship. After the college entrance exams, when she arrived in the city, she still sought him out. Considering Andrew's flirtatious nature, a spoiled man who always saw women as playthings and never lacked attention from them, Emily had no chance of becoming the only one. So, after a night of pleasure, Andrew never made any promises to her. Emily's hopes for him were completely dashed, and she turned her attention to my fiancé instead. As I see it, no one should be greedy for things that don't belong to them. It only leads to dangerous illusions. Yet I had given her too much to the point where she became hungrier for greater things. Now, with the Grant Corporation bankrupt, she could no longer find financial support from Ethan, so she had to return to her last resort, Andrew. And Andrew, as always, had never refused any woman. Yesterday, someone reported to me that Andrew and Emily had gone to a hotel, joined by several of his other mistresses. A life spent in such indulgence is bound to bring consequences sooner or later. When Andrew returned home, he looked visibly thinner. My uncle and aunt were heartbroken, showering him with concern and questions, while I focused solely on my work, continuing to create greater value for the Anderson Group. Grandpa often scolded Andrew and sometimes even lost his temper and slapped him. But Andrew was so lost in lust that he was beyond saving. Rather than take immediate action against Emily, I preferred to sit back and watch them tear each other apart. The fire only grew, and my job was simply to stand on the riverbank with my arms folded and enjoy the show. Anyway, I trusted that Emily was smart and ambitious enough to find her own way out. Just as I expected, Andrew stayed away from home for days. My people reported that he and Emily had gone into the maternity ward at a hospital, and he came out looking as black as a pot while Emily looked excited and agitated. By coincidence, a friend of mine who is an attending physician at that hospital checked for me, and the result was as I suspected. Emily was pregnant. I didn't know how they planned to handle it, but perhaps they no longer had any chances left. That morning, I drafted a short message and sent an MMS to my sister-in-law Olivia Gomez, who was traveling abroad, a photo of Andrew at a hotel partying all night with his string of mistresses, and attached the prenatal exam report for Emily. The message contained only one line. "Sorry, Olivia. Andrew says, when our child grows up, he'll take me home and kick you and your old woman out into the street." Seconds later, my phone started ringing like crazy. Olivia called frantically. I looked at the screen, smiled, and calmly declined the call. Olivia flew back in a rage, stormed into the house, grabbed Andrew by the hair, and dragged him out to the doorway. As a privileged daughter of the Gomez family, she never had the patience to endure such humiliation. Andrew, shamefully drunk, sneered. "If you want to call it cheating, fine. But don't play dirty. You're poor and you like to provoke, huh? You even let some outside woman get pregnant and plan to raise the child to snatch my inheritance later. Go to hell, you bastard." When he realized what was happening, he exploded. Without hesitation, he slapped Olivia across the face with no remorse. "Don't be ridiculous. If your family forced me to marry you, do you really think I wanted it? You act like you own me. Get lost." They began fighting violently. The child nearby wailed in terror. My parents and my uncle and aunt rushed in to stop them. In the end, Olivia was beaten until her face was swollen and bruised. With tears streaming down, she shouted before leaving, "Andrew, I won't let this go." She took the baby back to her parents' home, and Grandpa was so furious he slapped Andrew across the face, ordered him to kneel before the ancestral tablet, and demanded an apology. Andrew, going mad, snapped back, "Why should I kneel? You old men are dying soon. Do you think you can still hand everything to that brat?" Grandpa was so enraged he suffered a heart attack and had to be rushed to the hospital that night. Olivia immediately filed a lawsuit, citing adultery to demand a division of assets. Although Andrew's share of stock wasn't large, a significant portion was carved away. Still unsatisfied, Olivia's anger didn't subside. I kindly gave her Emily's address. After all, Olivia's family had ties to organized muscle. They were not people to be trifled with. The end of Emily came soon after. One day, a woman appeared on the street, her body covered in wounds and blood pouring from her lower abdomen. When I checked the news, I realized it was Emily. She trembled, could barely stand, her eyes rolled white and her mouth convulsed, and she was finally carried straight into the hospital. Grandpa had regained consciousness after emergency treatment, and Andrew knelt by his bedside, slapping his own face as he wept and begged. "Grandpa, I really was useless. I was drunk that day and spoke recklessly. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me." The moment he finished speaking, he pointed at me with a voice full of resentment. "It's all her. She went and tattled to the Gomezes. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have divorced, and the Anderson family wouldn't have lost such a huge sum." Grandpa's doctor said his health was fragile and that if he intended to make a will, he must think carefully. You are the true heir. Only you can carry on the Anderson name. Furious, Grandpa suddenly collapsed back into unconsciousness. After 3 hours of emergency care, he woke up again. This time, my parents stood guard at the door and refused to let Andrew enter. He raged in the hallway while Grandpa, wincing in pain and clutching my hand, said, "Now I see through him. That beast cannot shoulder our affairs. From now on, the Anderson Group will be in your hands. When I recover, I will sign the transfer of shares to you." Hearing that, Andrew went mad, pounding on the door and yelling that Grandpa was a wicked old man. Grandpa ordered the security guards to drag him out and give him a good beating, then forcibly remove him. After that incident, I stayed by Grandpa's side to help him recuperate. Once his condition stabilized, he quickly completed the paperwork to transfer shares to me. He said he needed time to rest and that from now on, company matters would be entirely my responsibility. Once I had assumed control, I summoned Andrew. Looking at the hatred in his eyes, I only smiled and said slowly, "For the sake of family, you have 2 choices. 1, there's a renovation project in Africa. I'll put you in charge of it so you can hone yourself there. 2, you can go out and find another way to live." He instantly flew into a rage and lunged at me as if to choke me. "By what right do you order me around? I won't accept this. Get out." After a violent struggle, he was restrained and beaten senseless by the guards. But this time he finally started to sober up a little. Full of resentment, he gathered his luggage and left quietly, flying straight to Africa. My people later reported that after waking in the hospital, Emily had lost the baby and was covered in injuries, severe and minor. But she didn't dare report it to the police. After a few days of rest, she finally sought out Ethan. By then, Ethan was working as a laborer on a construction site. His reputation ruined and blacklisted, so no one would hire him for office work. When he saw Emily, his eyes lit up. "You see, Emily, I know you're not that kind of girl who only chases money. I might be poor now, but I'll rise again." Emily recoiled in disgust and extended her hand with a bitter tone. "You told me to refuse Claire's sponsorship now. Look, I don't even have money to go to college. You must give me money." Ethan's smile died and his face darkened. "My family's drowning in debt. Where am I supposed to get the money for you?" Emily sneered in contempt. "And yet you once promised me so firmly. If you don't give me money, I'll tell the site manager you stole materials and see who dares hire you then." Hearing that, Ethan flew into a rage and struck her, shouting, "You filthy woman! Who do you think you are?" "If it weren't for you," Ethan roared, his face twisted with rage, "I'd still be engaged to Claire and living as a high-born gentleman. Get out! Get out of my sight! I never want to see your face again." Emily staggered to her feet, clutching her head, her expression contorted with hatred. "Just wait," she hissed. "You'll regret this." Then she immediately pulled out her phone and called the police. That morning, Ethan was detained for over 10 days for intentional assault. When he was finally released, the construction site refused to take him back. When I heard the news, I couldn't help but laugh. His family wasn't any better off either. Ethan's parents were already physically and mentally exhausted, and now they turned on their son in a fit of madness, beating and cursing him. "It's all your fault. Of all people, you had to mess with Claire Anderson, the one who fed you, clothed you and gave you everything. Even a dog wouldn't bite the hand that feeds it. She was right. You're nothing but a greedy, ungrateful bastard. What did we do in our past lives to deserve a son like you?" After so many blows, Ethan completely fell apart. Depression consumed him, and before long, his parents both passed away, leaving behind a miserable tragedy. Not long after, Ethan, homeless and destitute, spent months begging on the streets before finally climbing to the top of a high-rise building and throwing himself off. I felt absolutely nothing when I heard the news. The heavens are fair. Those unworthy of being human don't deserve to exist. Perhaps Olivia's methods had been too ruthless, because from that point on, Emily no longer dared to approach the wealthy circle again. She never made it to college, and being too lazy to hold a real job, she eventually drifted back to the same small town she once came from. But even there, she couldn't find her place. After a few days wandering around, she finally started working at a cheap massage parlor. The next time I saw her, she was wearing gaudy makeup and barely any clothing. twisting her body beside a bloated, greasy man whose shiny scalp glistened under the lights. She cooed in a syrupy voice. "Mr. Miller, make sure you call me again next time, okay? You know my technique's the best." The man grinned, revealing yellow-stained teeth, his hands groping her shamelessly. "Of course it is, sweetheart. You're the best there is." Emily forced out a giggle, but the disdain in her eyes was impossible to hide. Noticing it, the man's expression instantly darkened. He kicked her hard in the chest and shouted, "You filthy! Do you think you can look down on me when you've already sold yourself?" When I later heard this story, I merely smiled faintly. If she had known when to stop, if she had worked hard instead of scheming, maybe her life wouldn't have ended up like this. But then again, none of that had anything to do with me.